Hey guys, Julian here, and today we're going to be covering how to make your own chicken stock. Chicken stock is one of the most useful things to have around your kitchen, and it'll really help take your meals to the next level. It's also incredibly easy to make. You can use it to make sauces, soups, or even to make things such as lentils or polenta. The limit is only your imagination, so keep an open mind. Now, I generally make my chicken stock on a lazy Sunday afternoon because it can take some time, but it generally doesn't take much effort. So I'm going to be going over a few key things in this episode. So without further ado, let's get started cooking at home just like mom. Chicken stock is essentially a liquid that has the essence and flavor of chicken extracted into it. So in order to do this, we're going to need a large pot, preferably a large enough one to hold the amount of meat that you're going to be using. My pot is an 8-quart pot, but you can certainly use a smaller one or a larger one. Another handy gadget that you may want to pick up is a strainer that looks like this. It has a fine mesh that we will be using to remove things that float to the top of the stock when we are simmering it. If you can't come across one of these either on the internet or in a store, fear not, you can make do with just a spoon. Now this is where watching the last episode comes in. We roasted a chicken in the last episode, and I have saved all of the leftovers, including the bones, which will be of particular use as they have a lot of flavor that can be extracted into our stock. If you don't have any leftover chicken, feel free to pick up some chicken. You can go with either dark or white meat. Keep in mind though, it is more common that the cut of dark meat will have the bone in it. It is also important to note that the meat that you use can be raw or it can be cooked, like in this case. This next ingredient depends on your personal preference. When my mom makes her chicken stock, she always includes some cut of pork in the pot as well. Obviously, if you don't eat pork or you don't like the flavor, it is not necessary. Today I managed to find some pork neck in my grocery market, which is nice because it has a lot of bone in each piece. It also has a lot of nutritious meat as well. You can feel free to pick up any cut of pork that you like, but try not to buy one that is too expensive, because we are not going to be eating this meat. You're going to need some ginger as well. This will bring all the flavors in the stock together, as ginger is truly a magical root. The Chinese have been using ginger in their cooking and medicine for countless centuries, so there is really no reason to question it. Now that we have everything together, we can start preparing our meat. Now the chicken that I roasted still has the skin on it, and we want to minimize how much skin goes into our chicken stock because that will add an oily consistency to it, which is rather undesirable. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the skin from the chicken. I'm going to use a paring knife. So you can just use your hands, but I find that it's faster to use a paring knife. I'm going to be removing the majority of the fat on the pork as well. Obviously, this is the white substance on the meat. And don't worry, it's not the end of the world if you can't get rid of it all. It's just nice to get rid of the excess fat. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing that. Now you're going to want to cut off a chunk of ginger for your stock. How much depends on how much you like the flavor of ginger, so you can feel free to play around with it. I'm going to use about this much ginger right here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off the outer layer of the ginger, I guess the skin of the ginger. Now we need to fill the pot with enough water. A good rule of thumb is to cover the meat with about an inch or two of water, and to keep some water on reserve in a tea kettle for later if your stock reduces down too much. So I'm going to go ahead and fill the pot with water. With the water in the pot, we can go ahead and turn on our burner. We want to bring this up to a boil first, which may take anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes depending on how much you have in your pot. After the stock comes to a boil, we're going to bring it down to a simmer. Once it's simmering, we're going to want to let it simmer for about 3 to 4 hours. We'll check in on this later. Now it's Sunday morning, or maybe it's Sunday afternoon in your case, and our stock is going and you're hungover, right? So what better way to get rid of a hangover than with another drink? Now the official hangover cure drink, or the Sunday brunch drink, would have to be the Bloody Mary. There are many different versions of this drink, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to make one from scratch. Now to make a Bloody Mary, you're going to need some grape tomatoes, around 1 pound of them. I'm using grape tomatoes because they have a great flavor and they are usually sweeter than most other tomatoes. You're going to need a food processor or blender. You're going to need about a tablespoon of lemon juice, freshly squeezed, as there is no other way to go. You will also need a hot sauce. I choose Tabasco because I like the flavor it provides and it has a good kick to it, but feel free to experiment. You're also going to want some Worcestershire sauce, or however they pronounce it. And lastly, you're going to want to have some vodka, as this wouldn't get rid of your hangover without some more alcohol. Vodka is a flavorless, colorless, and odorless spirit. And I may get shot down for saying this, but in my opinion, I haven't found a more expensive vodka to be any better than a cheaper bottle. Needless to say, I'm no vodka connoisseur, so I'm going to be going with Svedka today. To begin, we need to change into our bartending attire. Whoa, that never gets old. Well, we then need to blend the tomatoes for about 1 minute to 1.5 minutes. So we have our tomatoes in the blender, and we're going to go ahead and give it a couple pulses first, just to break everything up first. Then you can go ahead and turn it on. So we're going to have to strain this mixture here in order to remove any chunks of skin and seeds that did not get blended while we were just blending it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. We can go ahead and, and put that in the smaller side of our cocktail mixer for the time being. So I'm going to go ahead and take this strainer here and do what it was made for. So now that we have our tomato juice all strained out in here, we're going to go ahead and put some ice into our glass to keep it cold. And then we're going to go ahead and put some ice in our cocktail mixer to go ahead and get started with our drink. So to start off, you're going to want to put about 3/4 ounce of Worcestershire sauce into your cocktail mixer. You're also going to want about 3/4 ounce of your hot sauce, which is not coming out of the bottle, depending on how hot you want your drink to be, into the mixer as well. You're also going to want about half a lemon squeezed into here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. You want to get every last drop. The lemon juice is really nice in this drink because it adds a nice freshness that complements the tomatoes very nicely. You're also going to want 1.5 ounces of vodka, so about a shot of vodka into your mixture, and then of course the tomato juice can go right on in. You want to smack it top and then start shaking. Now you want to shake about until the drink is nice and cold. And that's going to be when your cocktail shaker is nice and frosty like this. So now you can go ahead and strain your drink on top of ice. And of course, you can garnish it with a nice piece of celery. That'll cure any hangover, huh? So now that we've made a drink, let's go ahead and check up on our chicken stock. As you can see, there are a lot of white foamy areas in this chicken stock. That's what is commonly referred to in a kitchen as kitchen scum. You're not going to want that in your chicken stock. In fact, it's actually rendered off fat from whatever meat that's in your stock at the moment, floating to the top. So we can go ahead and use our strainer and just skim it off. Of course, you can use your spoon as well, but as you can see, it just comes right off. And this will help to clarify your stock and make it much more pure. So you can just go ahead and throw this out. You're going to want to check back every hour or so and repeat the skimming process if you need to. It's important to note that if your stock gets too hot, it will reduce too quickly. This is where your reserve water comes in. You can feel free to add it to your stock little by little to replace the lost liquid. Of course, you want your stock to reduce, as this will intensify the flavors, but you also want enough stock to use, so it's up to you to balance this out. I try to end up with a volume that is around 3/4 to 1/2 the original amount that was in there. So it's been about 3.5 hours and our stock is just about done. So we're going to go ahead and remove the meat, but it's up to you whether or not you want to keep it. Of course, all the flavors have left the meat and have gone into the surrounding liquid, so they may be a little bland. So in order to remove the meat, I like to use a pair of tongs and a wide enough strainer to sit on top of the pot. So in order to remove the meat, I just take a couple pieces at a time and put them on the strainer like so, in order to drain them of any liquid that they're carrying. And you can even squeeze out some of the liquid, as that's really what you want from this meat. That's the reason why we spent 4 hours reducing the stock with that meat in it. So I'm going to go ahead and just toss this out. Now when all is said and done, how are you going to store this liquid? I prefer to use separate containers such as this one and even larger ones such as these in order to portion out the stock. Now if you don't have containers such as these, you can store the liquid in anything that can safely contain a liquid. Once you have the liquid in the container, you can let it cool down and then store it in the fridge for up to 1.5 to 2 weeks. If you're pushing 2 weeks, you should boil the stock before using it again in order to get rid of any of the kitchen scum that floats to the top. You can also store it in the freezer for up to 6 months. I'm going to go ahead and strain the chicken stock in order to remove any of the bits of meat that I may have missed with the tongs. So I have my pot of chicken stock here and I have my strainer on top of the container that I'm going to pour it into. Anything that this strainer doesn't pick up is okay to consume. Don't worry about it. I'm going to go ahead and do it. So it's important to note that if you're going to freeze it, you want to make sure your container is either freeze-proof or that you leave enough room for the liquid to expand while it freezes, because it is water. So that's all it is, guys. So that's how you make a chicken stock, guys. It's not that hard to do. And it's a lot healthier than buying the store brands because those have a lot of sodium in them. And trust me, homemade stock is always 10 times better. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments section below. So next time we'll be seeing just what we can make with this chicken stock. So thanks so much for watching. I'm Julian, and bon appetit.
Spread a little love to some folks.